Hey guys, this is Sports with Dylan. Today was the very first day of NHL free agency, which means I figured I better make a video talking about approximately what happened. I can't get into every nook and cranny, but I can give you the basic details. I'm going to start off by talking about a team that did quite a bit today. They only made two major signings, but they were major signings and at good prices. That would be the Carolina Hurricanes with Dmitry Orlov and Michael Bunting. Both of them, if you saw my list yesterday, if not, I'll leave a link to it in the description, we're very high on that list. I like them both quite a bit as free agents. I think Dmitry Orlov was the best defenseman on the market. And I think that Michael Bunting was a solid young forward and one of the better forwards and probably the best young forward on the market. So, all in all, I think this was great on the Carolina Hurricanes to get both of these guys. They add one more depth winger because Max Pacioretty never worked out for him. The guy tore his Achilles twice. While he was there, he only played like 4 games for the team, so didn't have a chance to show what he could do, but they still needed that kind of player. So, hopefully, for their sake, Michael Bunting can be that. I explained why the Hurricanes should get Dmitry Orlov last night, because I actually predicted them to go for him. But, in short, they could use another defenseman with Brent Burns getting up there in age, and after Jacob Slavin and Brent Burns, they don't have many very reliable guys, especially with Shane Gottespier having gone into free agency, which means it'd be wise to get one more guy on that defense, especially with what they're clearly trying to do, which is go all in for the Cup this year. They are a very good team. They have proven that time after time, but they have never even made it to the Cup with this current roster. But that could very well change this year. If they put it all together, they could be our 2024 Stanley Cup winners. Next team I'm going to talk about is a team that confuses me quite a bit. That would be the Nashville Predators. In the past couple of months, they have traded away Michael Granlund, Tanner Jeannot, Matthias Alcom, Nino Niederreiter, as well as Ryan Johansson just recently. And yesterday, they cut Matt Duchene. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, they're just cutting all of their older players. They're trying to retool as a younger, better team. That makes sense. Plenty of teams do that when they get to the point where they don't think they can compete anymore. Until today, when the Predators go out and sign Ryan O'Reilly, the 32-year-old, I believe, center, former Blue center, and then was traded to the Maple Leafs, to a 4-year massive contract, as well as another former Leafs player, Luke Schenn, who's traded there as well at the deadline from the Canucks, who's also in his 30s, as a defenseman, to a massive contract, as well as Gustav Nyquist, who I believe is 30 as well now, too, to not quite so big of a contract, but still a solid contract. This confuses me quite a bit, because I thought they're getting rid of all their older players, but then they go and sign a bunch of quality older players. So I do not know what Barry Trotz, the new general manager of the Predators, is doing anymore. I am stumped. But I am not going to criticize him, because I quite respected him as a coach, and I suspect well-respected general manager David Paul has something to do with this. They clearly have a plan. I just haven't quite figured out what that plan is. Maybe they do think they compete. They still have Philip Forsberg and Roman Josi, as well as superstar goalie Juuse Saros. So, maybe they are just trying to compete. Maybe they're just cutting ties with their older, expensive veterans that weren't doing anything, but now we're getting more quality veterans that will actually contribute to this team. I don't know. We'll see. I suspect something more is coming. I just have no idea what that is. But in a couple of months, it will probably all be clear. The next team I'm going to talk about was a team I talked about this time last year, because I think they've done quite well for themselves once again in free agency. That would be the Detroit Red Wings. Couple days ago, they started off by acquiring Kyler Yamamoto and Clem Costin from the Oilers in exchange for future considerations. They were taking on the large contract of Yamamoto and the cheap and well-done contract of Clem Costin. I was really sad to see him go. But they didn't have to give anything in return. So it was a pretty good deal. They then end up cutting Yamamoto, but they just signed Clem Costin to an extension. They also signed Daniel Sprong, the former Kraken forward, today. He was quite a good forward on the Kraken. He scored 30 goals. 31, actually, I believe, a couple seasons ago. So he is quite good. I do not know why the Kraken didn't go to re-sign him as a restricted free agent. But they didn't. So he went into unrestricted free agency, where the Red Wings snatched him up. Another guy they grabbed is JT Compher. The guy that everyone was watching in free agency to get a massive pay raise, which he did. He turned out to be quite the center for the Avalanche this past season. After Nazem Kadri left and Gabriel Landeskog got injured, he quite filled that void. So that meant that he was going to get paid. The Avalanche clearly weren't going to be able to afford him, and that was right, because he got a $5 million a year contract for 5 years. That is not affordable for the Avalanche. It might even be an overpay for the Red Wings. I don't think they really needed him, but that is a bit more of an offensive boost. On the defensive side, they snatched up both Shane Gottisbehere as well as Justin Hall for cheap. That was pretty good on them because they could have used a bit more on their team. Especially that defense after Philip Hronek was traded away at the deadline, and Ben Chiro just didn't seem to be turning out. So, they added 2 more quality depth defenders to this team. They are looking to be a playoff team once again, and I think they have what it takes. The question is, can they actually put it all together? The other thing they did was they added both Alex Lyon and James Reimer in net to compete with Ville Husso, who had an underwhelming season this past season in his first with the Red Wings after quite a good season with St. Louis the year prior. Maybe Ville Husso will break out, but if not, he could be sent to the minors, and they might run with Alex Lyon, who brought the Florida Panthers to the playoffs when Sergei Bobrovsky was absolutely terrible, and James Reimer, who, despite his age, has been quite the solid goalie in San Jose these past couple of years. Speaking of goalies, Joonas Krisplo, who was acquired by the Kings this past trade deadline, ended up signing with the Senators on a massive 5-year contract. This doesn't surprise me that much that they paid him a ton, because despite having multiple very underwhelming years in Columbus, he ended up skyrocketing up this past year, so much so that he was traded to the Kings at the deadline, and then from there, obviously, he was an unrestricted free agent. Meanwhile, the Senators desperately needed a goalie, because Cam Talbot did not work out for them. Anton Forsberg had been injured, and they really didn't have anyone else proper after that, so it made sense to go and acquire a proper goalie. If Joonas Krisplo can play well, this team is all set. This team should be contending for the playoffs quite well, because it looks like they have it all. But we'll have to see if he actually turns out. He could just turn out to be a massive bust. This may have been his only good season. Especially when you watched him with the Kings when the playoffs came. He just did not remotely have it. Meanwhile, the Kings had an rather underwhelming free agency in net. Given that it didn't sound like they're bringing Joonas Krisplo back, they still desperately needed a goalie. A year ago, they looked pretty darn set with Cal Peterson and Jonathan Quick. But both of them came into the season and played absolutely awful. They ended up bringing Phoenix Copley up for the minors and sending Cal Peterson down, and then they ended up trading away Jonathan Quick in exchange for Krisplo. Phoenix Copley isn't a bad goalie, but he's not your starter. Today, the Kings ended up signing 2 mediocre goalies in David Rittich, who is a good backup, but no more than that, and Cam Talbot, who was a starter, but just didn't have it this past year. And I think it's just because of age. He's 35 years old. You can't be expecting him to be a starting goalie much longer. I think he just needs to settle for a backup role. But The Kings now have 3 mediocre goalies on their roster in Phoenix Copley, David Rittich, and Cam Talbot. I'm not sure if that is enough to compete. I don't think any of them are even on the scale with Korpisalo. So even though they have quite the offense now, and not a bad defense, depending on how they actually play aside from Drew Doughty, then this could truly be what holds them back this year. But for now, we'll have to see. There are plenty of high-priced free agents still in the market, such as Vladimir Tarasenko, Max Domi, and Tyler Bertuzzi. So we'll have to see where they go. That could truly make an impact on what happens. Plus, there are plenty of trade candidates left, especially in net, as well as many other positions, for sure, that could still be traded as well, which means that it is not remotely close to being over. But for now, thanks for watching.